Why do generals suddenly become more loyal? Most people believe that power collapses because of external enemies. A foreign government imposes sanctions. An opposition movement gains momentum. A military defeat weakens the regime. But history tells a different story. The most dangerous threat to power is often not outside the system. It comes from within. Today, I want to explore a fascinating psychological question. Why do powerful people suddenly become more loyal when a system begins to weaken? Why does a military general suddenly appear on television praising the leader? Why does a senior official start posting patriotic messages every day? Why do people who once seemed confident suddenly become desperate to prove their loyalty? The answer has less to do with loyalty than most people think. It has everything to do with fear. Intelligence agencies have understood something for decades. People rarely reveal their true intentions through words. They reveal them through behavioral patterns. This is why modern intelligence work often focuses less on events and more on reactions. The event itself is not always important. The response is. And few examples illustrate this better than Venezuela. When international pressure increased against the Venezuelan government, observers noticed something strange. Certain officials became dramatically more vocal in their support of the regime. At first glance, this looked like commitment. But psychologists often see something different. When people feel secure, they usually don't need to advertise their loyalty. When they feel threatened, they often do. This principle appears everywhere in human behavior. In workplaces, in family, in politics, and especially inside authoritarian systems. The louder the declaration of loyalty becomes, the more likely fear is hiding underneath it. Intelligence professionals sometimes watch for 3 specific behavioral signals. The first is overcompensation through public loyalty. Imagine that rumors begin circulating. Perhaps there are reports of sanctions. Perhaps someone is suspected of communicating with foreign governments. Perhaps nobody even knows whether the rumors are true. The truth often matters less than the uncertainty. Once uncertainty enters the system, people begin asking dangerous questions. Why was that official targeted? Why was that person excluded? Who might be cooperating with outsiders? The result is predictable. Some individuals begin displaying exaggerated loyalty, not because they are confident, because they are anxious. Psychologically, this is a defensive mechanism. They are attempting to send a message. Don't look at me. I'm still on the team. Ironically, that behavior can reveal insecurity rather than commitment. The second signal is silence. And silence can be far more significant than words. A public figure suddenly disappears from media appearances. Official engagements become rare. Public statements stop. Social media activity vanishes. Many observers interpret this as caution. But from a psychological perspective, silence often reflects internal calculation. The individual may be reassessing risks. They may be watching and waiting. They may be trying to determine who will survive the coming struggle. This behavior appears repeatedly throughout history. When uncertainty rises, some people become louder, others become invisible. Both reactions reveal valuable information. The third signal is private contact. This is often the most important stage. A senior figure quietly reaches out through diplomatic channels. Communication begins through intermediaries. Conversations occur behind closed doors. At this point, the individual is no longer merely reacting emotionally. They are exploring alternatives. Psychologists describe this as a transition from fear management to survival planning. The person is no longer asking, "How do I appear loyal?" They are asking, "What happens if this system fails?" That is a very different question, and it often marks the beginning of a profound shift. Notice the progression. First comes exaggerated loyalty. Then comes strategic silence. Finally comes exploratory contact. These are not random behaviors. They form a psychological sequence. Fear, observation, adaptation. Humans follow this pattern in many environments. Political systems are no exception. What makes this particularly fascinating is that intelligence organizations are often less interested in what people say than in why they say it. A speech is data. A disappearance is data. A sudden burst of patriotism is data. A quiet meeting is data. The goal is not merely to understand current events. The goal is to identify future behavior. Who is nervous? Who is calculating? Who is preparing to leave? These questions often reveal more about the future of a regime than official announcements ever could. This leads us to a deeper lesson about power itself. Most people imagine that political collapse happens suddenly. One day, everything appears stable. The next day, everything falls apart. Reality is rarely that dramatic. Collapse is usually a process long before it becomes an event. It begins with uncertainty. It spreads through suspicion. It grows through fear. And eventually, people begin adjusting their behavior to survive. The system weakens not because everyone stops believing at once. It weakens because individuals quietly start preparing for different outcomes. One person becomes excessively loyal. Another disappears from view. A third begins looking for an exit. Individually, these actions seem insignificant. Collectively, they can signal the beginning of a much larger transformation. That is why intelligence professionals study reactions rather than headlines. The headline tells you what happened. The reaction may tell you what happens next. And in politics, as in life, the future often reveals itself through the smallest behavioral signals, long before the final outcome arrives. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe, share this video, and join us in exploring the hidden psychology behind power, influence, and political change.